can't stream. That's why.
All right. Well, people can hear us, so I'm going to go ahead and explain what just happened. So we thought we were streaming, guys. We thought we were broadcasting, but apparently the video resolution on the software that we're using was not the right configuration for YouTube. So on our end, it looked like we were live, and thankfully, you guys posted some stuff down in the comments, and we were aware of this yellow little error box here. So I went ahead and changed the resolution. Now it's working. I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce Duane and we'll get started again. This is a topic that came to our attention when, yeah, and I just noticed okay, good. Zach says we're good to go. This is a topic that came to our attention when we were discussing the approach that most of the organizations out there are taking to trying to, quote unquote, fix the legal system, more specifically the family law system, family courts, and how the approach that our Nevada judges was taking was different and actually seemed to be making a difference in Nevada because it was more of a dispassionate approach. It was more about the statistics and the numbers. It was more about how often the judges make mistakes according to the Supreme Court, not just according to just a random person. And 3 months ago, I actually started pointing cameras at the judges and the attorneys, and that was having an obvious effect as well. And the other thing that we decided we could sort of do in this live stream together is deal with that exact same sort of problem, the problem of taking the more do something that feels good right now in the moment versus do something that actually makes a difference or a change. We were talking about how that's also a problem with the individual, with the you and me, the ordinary person, and sometimes the approach that we take just, in our ordinary lives and how sometimes we'll do things that help us, in the moment now. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Duane because he's got a lot more experience on this, especially when it comes to his channel's topic. So go ahead, Duane.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me on. And this is one of those topics that Alex and I talk about offline quite often, when we're talking on the phone and stuff. And it's really fascinating to see the difference in well, not necessarily approaches. I mean, my channel has always been focusing on the emotional side and getting people stable, be able to get some hope back. And Alex, your channel is really focused on the procedural part of it. And I think the big difference is that we can make decisions in the moment that potentially might make us feel better or feel good or lash out to where we feel like we're getting some type of victory out of this, but oftentimes those in the moment decisions, or most of the times, those in the moment decisions really hurt your case, and it doesn't really affect anything. And the second part about this, what I find really fascinating with what Alex is doing, is you see a lot of the different channels and not channels, but like men rights activists and those type of things, where they're focused on, they're basically almost focused on the emotional side. Like I've seen discussions, like Alex mentioned, talking about having cameras in the courtroom, where I'll see other people in other forums say, well, they kick us out and they won't let us have cameras. Well, the difference is, Alex is doing it as the a journal. Well, not almost. It is a journalistic type endeavor. So he's not going into the court as Alex, or I'm not going in as Duane, holding up my phone wanting to record it. He's submitting the request to do it appropriately, asking the court for access to this public hearing to broadcast it for basically newsworthiness. And I mean, you look at the difference, right? You see how people have tried to do things over the years, and it just doesn't accomplish anything. It messes up the argument. So you can get in a mode to where you're doing something where you think you're being productive. You're spinning your wheels, you're making noise, but you're not getting anywhere. Whereas if you can take a step back and look at it more objectively, like Alex was talking about earlier, you can start to do things that really affect change. You're still putting in the same effort. Actually, in some situations, I'd say you're putting in less effort, and you're able to actually accomplish something. I mean, it's a fascinating. I mean, Alex, what's your take on that?
Well, actually, now that you brought up everything that you said it's very true. It's absolutely true. We're not just going in there pointing an iPhone at them. That's not, we're having to follow the Supreme Court rules. We're having to do it under the cloak of our Nevada judges. I also, have to say that you can tell something works by how upset and angry it makes some of the participants. I may as well just go ahead and show them. I'm going to go ahead and just run that clip that I was talking to you about really quickly.
No, thank you, Your Honor. Before we proceed, I just once again object to the English being in the courtroom.
This camera, the organization has represented itself to be a member of the press. It is in fact a question about its impartiality and stand. And in return, I'm exfoliated on Facebook using that mechanism there. These people are scum. They are anathema to our legal proceedings. They use it to intimidate litigants, to criticize people they disapprove of. I object to this organization being in the courtroom and having their cameras here.
The definition of media has certainly expanded in the days or the years of the internet, but it is not up to the court to make a determination as to what is quote-unquote legitimate media versus anything else. As you know, our courts are open to the public.
This is not press. This is a equivalent of an Eastern European political organization. Now, that's what they are. In our emotional terms, this is extraordinary in the history of the state. I've never, even back in the mob days, have seen anything like this. This is scurrilous behavior through and through. It's not defensible. It cannot be defended. You gave them a chance to show that they were...
So, I guess that gives people hopefully a pretty good idea of what we had to deal with, even when we did follow the rules. So,
Right.
and as I was telling Duane, it's a really good measure as to how effective whatever it is that you're doing, based on how many people are really trying to, opposed to it, trying to block it, trying to get you to stop doing it. Duane and I were talking about something while the video was running, and I had a specific question that I had for him that I was hoping he could, elaborate on. But with people who come to my channel, oftentimes who have done things that are damaging to their case, they often focus very heavily on the fact that they can explain why they did what they did. In other words, that they can justify it. Do you have...
Right.
How do you deal with trying to get people focused less on being able to justify what they've done and just letting things go? I love the smile. I mean, it's a common thing.
Well, because what I do is I send them to you, Alex. but bottom line is what I tell people is you can't focus on the emotional part of it. You have to focus on the procedural part. See, the thing it's almost like, let's say you pull up a video game. You pull up your Xbox, your Xbox One, you throw a game in there, and you decide, you know what, I want to play this with my controller upside down. Damn it, and I'm going to do that. Well, you're not going to win, right? I mean, you might be able every once in a while to get things to work right, but you're working against the whole process. And that's why it's so important to understand the process so that you know what you're actually trying to accomplish. Because like take the video clip that everyone just watched. You have this attorney who is attacking you guys, attacking our Nevada judges. So it's actually branded under our Nevada judges, right? If I remember correctly, it's not the proper person.
No, it's definitely
So
under our Nevada judges. You're right about that.
Yeah. So it's an organization that is kind of like a watchdog journalistic group focusing on court procedures and what people are doing and judges and stuff like that. And but the person is sitting there saying, and what the guy was trying to say is that is like an MRA type thing, or that's just an organization that's created that's biased on whatever. And Alex, as you guys know, I made a note of this. One thing I'll say is there are times that Alex and I have conversations where he'll look at an outcome of something and he'll be like, yeah, that was the right outcome because it followed procedures and law. And I'm like, I'm trying to see how to say that. I'm like, that really freaking gets to me because emotionally, it's not the right outcome, right? Yeah. But see, and that's what I'm talking about. It's like you have to figure out how this process works. Again, if you try to play your video game in a way that it's not meant to be, and you're like, damn it, you're going to follow my rules. Well, no, you're not, right? You're not going to get, the whole system to say, okay, well, Duane's come up and he's decided that he's just going to explain what happened. Okay, and let me roll back into what Alex was talking about a minute ago, are the question. We all can sit there and look at our situation, and we understand our perspective, right? So when we tell our story in our minds, that story makes absolute sense. The problem is that you are just rolling the dice that you're going to be able to communicate that effectively.
Absolutely.
It's so much better, or you're not so much better. You have to do it in a way that falls in line with the court system, is not emotional, and is based on facts and information. And I don't know how many times I've heard people say, I go into court and the judge didn't even look at any of my stuff and they just sided against me. Now, and Alex and I have talked about these type of cases often offline as well. And the problem is with that, well, one is maybe it was just a bad call, right? And this is why it's really important what Alex is doing in Nevada, and I know it's starting to expand in other areas, is because if the judge made a procedural error, you can then appeal it. And if it was a procedural error against the law, more than likely you're going to win it.
Right.
And Alex, you've had a lot of experience on this to get the knowledge where you are now,
right,
to be able to be successful in that. But I think a lot of people, they either, and here's the caveat, right? In that story I just said, where I came in with all my evidence and they ignored me, it's like, what specifically really happened, right? I mean, did you ask the question correctly? Was there another motion that was made to where, that you didn't get an opportunity to answer because of that? There's a lot more to it than it. Now, sometimes it is just bad, right? I'm sure Alex has probably seen it, but the difference is when it's just bad, then you can find a procedural problem with it and do something about it, right?
Exactly. And one of the things that you kind of glazed over, but's actually even bigger, jumped out at me as huge, was the dice rolling. That's,
oh yeah,
a lot of people, it's like you said, like in your own head, you can make sense of it and you can explain it to somebody in 10 or 15 minutes. The judges don't have time for 10 or 15 minutes. At best, they have 10 or 15 seconds. And don't roll the dice. Like if you can choose between doing something and then explaining yourself versus just not even bothering to have done it, so you don't even have to talk about it now, the latter is always going to be better because you're not rolling the dice. And yes, absolutely, all of the appeals that I've won were on procedural and legal errors. They call them questions of law. And the reason why it's really easy to win those, comparatively speaking, is because the appellate panel, which is 3 different judges, they do not defer to your lower judge. They will think about it in their own heads and make a decision. And if that is contradictory to what your judge did, then they sweep it aside, reverse it, and send it back. When it comes to those other areas, which you called good call, bad call, it's often involving questions of fact, and that's when it gets really hairy, and sometimes, like you said, there are bad calls. And you just have to kind of keep trudging along and hope that you can sort of come back later on and try to fix the situation. Because when it comes to most of what family judges do, it does involve fact-finding, and then they do get deference on a lot of what they do there. Not on everything, but I mean, it suffices to say I've won 4 appeals, and not a single one of those appeals was on a question of fact. So I stayed in what you said, the procedural area. That's where you're more effective.
Well, and yeah, I'm sorry, I'm like chomping at the bit to say something, but I mean, and that's it, right? I mean, instead of you getting emotionally, I mean, you have a unique mind. I will get, you're fascinating to watch work, but you have to take the emotional part of it out and focus on the rules. I know we've had discussions before too, where there's times where you said you will file stuff to where you figure they're going to rule against you, and you're like, just let them rule against me, rule on this point, which I know is wrong. You've read the law, you understand it, and that's how you won those appeals, because you're playing the game with the controller right side up.
Mm-hmm.
You've gone through the tutorial, you went through the part where you did how the game works, and now you know how to play it. I mean, so many of us don't even do that. We just like jump in the middle, level 50. I don't know why I'm using video game analogies.
It works though.
But and then you're sitting there going, holy hell, why am I getting creamed by everybody? And I can't make any progress and I'm losing everything. Well, it's because you didn't spend a little bit of time in the beginning to figure out what the hell is going on in the first place to be able to do it.
Yeah, again, you glazed over something that's huge. The controller right side up thing. I want to go back to that. A lot of times, the attorneys in the family law industry, a lot of times, I'm going to say most of the time, they don't really think the rules and statutes matter all that much. And they just kind of go into court and wing it. And I think for a lot of the litigants, we think, oh, well, if that's how it's done, then that's how it's done. But one of the things that I learned was you can't really out-talk or out-relationship these lawyers. If you're in there representing yourself, you just don't have a chance because they're there all the time. They've gone to school with the judges. You can't out-relationship them. So one of the things that I found out is, hold on a second, they're not really following any of these rules. And I'm going to go ahead and try to force them to do this because they're supposed to do this. And I may not be able to out-relationship that lawyer, but I sure can't out-rule him. And the only reason I can really do that is because the Nevada Supreme Court is so amazing. But I think that probably all 50 states have a good Supreme Court when you compare it to the family courts, because the justices on the Supreme Court, most of the time they don't come from a family law background. So when they see a case come up to them, they don't see it the same way as a family law judge does. They see, wait a minute, why aren't these rules being followed? This is weird.
Right.
This isn't right. And they'll reverse it and send it back. And you can end up sort of forcing that courtroom to end up following the rules that they should be following in the first place. And that's really what I did it because I had to do it. Like, and I guess I do have a unique mind. I'm not going to say I don't. But the way I saw it is I have to protect my son and I have to do it the way that it's going to work. So for me, it was just being nice isn't working. Winging it isn't working. Nothing is working. So I was like, let's try this. And that started to work. It started to make everyone really upset. But that's the only choice that I had left. So,
well, and one of the things I want to add on this that's really tough is, and I know we've talked about this in other interviews and collaborations we've done, but oftentimes you get in these situations where you hire an attorney, you're expecting that the good money and lots of money that you're giving them is going to make them your pit bull. They are going to be your advocate and fight tooth and nail for you. And unfortunately, that's not really the case. Most of the times, whenever you get a bad ruling, attorney is going to turn around and say, well, we did our best. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, whatever. And even if you push appealing, a lot of times they won't do it. And it's one of those things where it's really tough because I know for me emotionally, I was not in a place to be able to represent myself. I was so stressed, dealing with so much PTSD, so many emotional flashbacks and triggers, that to be able to be disconnected enough to be able to argue a cogent point and follow all that stuff when my life felt like it was on the line was not possible. So, it's really another weird dichotomy, because it would be best if you had an attorney that was an advocate like that would just freaking go to town for you. If that doesn't work, you represent yourself. And I think that it's more of like a hybrid approach. I love the word hybrid, is where you learn the process, which is what I was trying to do. Alex, I wish your channel was around when I was doing this, because it would have really helped me understand, because I was fighting with my attorney a lot on, no, the way I read it is this. And there are a lot of, yelling matches where I was trying to get them to do what I wanted to do. But it boils down to is learning the rules of this and then following it. And playing it that way. And I think that until that happens, everyone can do these marches and they can have their channels and they can do all these different things to say this is wrong. Another guy, has killed himself because of a family court ruling. But until we start being effective with what we're doing and how we're trying to address it, it's not going to change.
Right.
The only way that way is going to work to change is so many people are going to have to be negatively affected by it to where there's a groundswell to where people do it. And I think that in a lot of ways that's starting to happen because, women are now starting to get abused just as much as men in the family court system. So it's driving more visibility into it. But still, you're still talking about a way of it's almost like, the beach's enormity. We can be strategic in how we try to deal with it, or we're just going to have to, rush it. And a lot of people are going to get hurt and their lives destroyed and their futures ruined and their relationships with their kids ruined. All these things. But, Alex, just look at what you've been able to accomplish. When we first started talking a couple of years ago, you were just a little speck and the judges didn't really like you and, they didn't know what the hell you were, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But now you have people seeing that you're actually causing people to be held accountable. You're grading people so people can see what they're doing. and you're not biased. I mean, if you guys don't know Alex, I mean, I know you're on his channel, but if you came from my channel, he's the type of guy that if there was somebody he didn't like on an attorney thing, but they had a good ruling, he's going to post it up and say, hey, good ruling. They did a good job. They're whatever. I mean, that's just the kind of pragmatic approach that you take on all this.
Right. I had to, because in the end, I really thought I could just yell and scream and it might feel good in the moment, but we're going back to the topic of the video. But in the end, I really wanted to actually change the system. And so I started to look at everything that I did and wanted to do through that lens. Is blasting my family judge going to change anything? No. Even my own friends and family probably wouldn't change their votes. They'd probably be like, yeah, Alex, you're right. And then when I'm gone, man, I don't know what happened to him, but who knows what that judge did was right or wrong.
Yeah.
But I just, it really, one of the things you said that resonated with me was the storming the beaches of Normandy thing and how many people would have to get hurt before that screaming and yelling approach would work. It's absolutely one of my basic principles to try to connect with the dispassionate masses, the people who have not ever touched the system, the ambivalent people. I never thought that ideally we would wait until millions of people suffered. And I did note, by the way, that the whole gender thing is starting to balance out because of the change in how the presumption works. Now there's more women that are starting to see this as a problem. That's helping. But again, like from the beginning, I thought to myself, the quicker way, the more effective way is to find a way to connect to these people who have never touched the court system. And I have gotten so many messages from them saying, hey, I work in construction. I never thought I would care anything about the legal system, and until I started to see how many screw-ups are on the bench. If I messed up half the time, I'd want them out of there too, or I would be fired, stuff like that. And so these communications told me, keep doing what you're doing, because these people who have no clue how it works are starting to believe me that it's a problem. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I'll say on that, and we talked about this recently too, is, to be honest, whenever the election cycle comes up and I open up my ballot and I'm sitting there and I'm looking and it's listing judges, I have no idea who these people are. The only names I recognize are the ones that were my family court judge, that I've actually had dealings with.
Yeah.
Right? I have nothing. And I told Alex before, I mean, it's like if there was a California, Nevada judges, which for my little area, I would absolutely pull it up and look at the thing and say, okay, this is how they rule. And, I would pick according to that. But most of the time, it's such a black hole.
There's no information
system that you don't know. You don't really know what the heck's going on or how it works or what these people are doing unless you absolutely know them. And most of the time, unless you have an interest in legalese and you spend your spare time going to court and just sitting in, because I think for the most part you can, unless it's a closed hearing, you can go and observe. I'll get back to that in a minute, because I think the court observers is part of a problem too. But I mean, as an individual, if you want to do it, you could do that. But I mean, you're really not going to know how the process works or anything about it.
Absolutely. And we have a problem here in Nevada where the government says, since nobody knows anything about the judges, we should just take away the vote. It's like, have you guys ever thought of maybe telling them something a little bit about the judges? No, we're not gonna give you guys information. We're just gonna take your vote away, and we're just gonna appoint them all. I really wanted you to go into the topic on closed hearings and court observation, because I had another clip that I wanted to play. But first, go ahead and let's go into that. What were you going to talk about with that point?
Well, what I was going to say is oftentimes people get involved in these, like, I'm irritated. I've been burned by the court, so I'm going to be one of these court watchers. And I was talking to a different individual who's, I don't know what channel. I think he runs one of your our state judges sites, but I don't. But anyways, I was talking to him about it, and he was like, "No, we can't. They kick us out, or they won't let us record." And I think part of the problem is that it turns into a disruptive thing, to where it's like, I'm here to focus on you, to make sure that you judge do your job, or the attorney does your job, or whatever. And again, it sets up the wrong precedents. I mean, that dispassionate approach that our Nevada judges is taking, and I hope to God that starts replicating across other areas, and people start doing that, because that's really where it's going to happen. And unfortunately, most news, like I'll take the McDonald video clip you had where he got arrested and taken into custody and it turned into a fight. in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, somebody's going to grab that and run it on TV because you got a fight in court. Of course they're going to do it. Nobody was interested, right? I mean, it comes down to it when normal mainstream type media is trying to decide what to put on the air. It's all about ratings and what they can use to grab people in and fill space.
Right.
And if they don't feel it has any value, they're not going to do it.
Right.
So that's where it's important for like your organization to where, you know, you're doing it for a specific reason and that's your target audience. So there's a reason for you to be there. And I'm just, you know, just the fact that you've been able to accomplish that, you've been able to get in and live broadcast. I don't know if you guys, I mean, obviously your people know this, but for anybody who's come over from my channel, you know, Alex has a crew basically that will go in and live stream a court proceeding in real time. And then you'll edit it later. But I mean, that's phenomenal. I mean, when does that happen?
I even that lawyer from the clip, he actually at one point said, never in my 30 years have I been broadcast live. And he was complaining about how, I guess during his cross-examinations, some people were posting comments about it. And anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right. The, you know, you touched on the whole court observation, how that person complained they get removed from the courtroom. We have the same problem in Nevada. It has to do with what we call domestic relations matters, which encompasses divorce and child custody. And I know for me, my mind did not change on this until I saw the Judge Judy interview clip. And I'm going to show that. But before I show that, I was curious, were you somebody who always from the beginning thought it would be a good idea to broadcast, or even just not even broadcast live, even just, you know, get footage and record it or put it up later of family court proceedings? Or was that something that Judge Judy changed your mind as well? Or maybe even I changed your mind? Because before, I was actually more on the side of privacy. My mind has now changed having seen the clip.
I would, honestly, I never thought about it until you brought it up.
Okay.
So until you started doing it, and I mean, it was just one of those things where it was like, holy crap, what an interesting idea. I mean, and to be honest, and I know, I think if I understand it correctly, I mean, mainly you're broadcasting criminal stuff. Have you done a family court hearing yet?
No, I actually haven't done a family court hearing yet because of the problem of that statute we have in Nevada that can have, unless both of the parents agree, we wouldn't be allowed to stay in the room. I'm going to go ahead and run it now so the viewers know what we're talking about. And just letting you guys know, we'll be talking to each other. You won't be able to hear us, and that's by design. It's on purpose that we did that.
And I really felt that the family court was a place that should be open to the press.
Yes.
Because at that time in New York, and probably in a lot of other places, it was sort of the dumping ground for morons and political hacks. People who had gone around and collected signatures for politicians to get on the ballot. They say, you know, we owe them a favor.
Yeah.
And where are we going to put them? We can't put them in the civil court or the Supreme Court because press goes in there to report. So we have to put them in a place where nobody can see the morons that we're appointing to the court. Now, I know that because I worked in the family court as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And it was frightening to see the mentality of people who were impacting on the lives of families and children.
The judges.
The judges. So I thought it was a great idea to have cameras in the courtroom when I became a family court judge. And I
When you were a lawyer in front of these judges that you call morons, did you ever find yourself in contempt of court for such talk?
I never called them a moron to their face. I didn't believe in excuses.
Yeah.
So when I had the opportunity to say to 60 Minutes, yes, you can come, or no, you can't, I said, if I allow cameras in my courtroom, perhaps that will open up the family courts so that people will be able to see what kind of justice is being delivered by this very expensive court system. I actually...
So I got a couple of questions here. One from Shay. First thing that she asked had to do with the actual clip that I showed. Let's scroll up a little bit here. She says, during the last video of the McDonald trial, Craig Mueller, which is the defense attorney for those of you who don't know, he looks over at McDonald and says, Mike, 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 then walks over to him. Okay, so Mike was trying to speak to the judge, and the judge told him, you can't speak. You have an attorney who's going to speak on your behalf. And so the defense attorney, which was Craig Mueller, was upset that he was not stopping, and so he actually left the table, the defense table. He left the table and ran up into where they had all the inmates, including Mike, and he just kind of didn't grab him like roughly. He just kind of held onto him and like stuck his head next to his ear, and he probably told him to stop. I'm not sure, but he was definitely very adamant, very angry that his client was trying to speak, and so that's what happened. Apparently, I had another one. Go ahead if you found that second comment, Duane, or was it just that one?
There was another comment that Zach had put in, and it just says, "I wish I could talk to you guys in private. I want to let this go so badly, but I can't. My ex convinced everyone I was a potential mass shooter at daycare. Now she has full custody. How do I let go?" And I mean, you know, the problem with this whole situation is it's so damn emotional, right? I mean, this isn't just losing a promotion at work or a job or whatever. I mean, it's your kids, it's your reputation. There's so many things that get wrapped into it. And I mean, normally what I would advise somebody in that situation is one, I'd want to deep dive a little bit more into the details, and then back it out, right? So, because typically in that situation, you still have. Let me back up. What I'm trying to say is, first thing is what is your custody and how much time do you still have with your kids, right? And if your ex has won full custody because of this, and you get 1 weekend a month, then you make the most out of that 1 weekend a month. You're trying to build the relationship with your kids. If they're turned around and because of all this, they say you have to jump through flaming hoops and do a hula dance, you jump through the flaming hoops and do the hula dance to try to demonstrate that you can do it. Now, actually, that's a great thing because I think that kind of rolls into the McDonald case. And I mean, I don't follow this that much, so Alex, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
But part of that whole thing is kind of the situation that started out with him. He had made mistakes. The court was following this process, and it finally got to the point where it's like, okay, all right, you need to get some help, and you need to have supervised visitation. And he said no. And then he goes down this road where it's like, well, I want to see my kids. You're denying me seeing my kids. Well, no. There's a flaming hoop you have to jump through. Everyone who's been through family court has had some flaming hoop or another you've had to jump through.
Yes.
I mean, I have too.
Absolutely.
I had to do custody evaluation.
Yeah.
I had to provide information that I didn't feel I needed to provide because the ex already had it, but they were basically, and I was mad. I was really angry about it. And I could have said, no, F you, I'm not going to do it. And that would have torpedoed any chance I would have, again, any chance I would have to have an ultimate victory. It goes back to what we were talking about on the emotional side of you can do something that makes you feel good in the moment, right? I could have told her F you, and I would have felt good in the moment. But the residual consequence is that I could have lost custody. I could have, instead of getting 50-50 and joint for physical and custodial, it could have been like what this person's talking about, that their ex was able to get full custody. They have full decision-making capability. And we all know that if you're dealing with a toxic, narcissistic, evil ex, they will use that to punish you. And the key on that is you have to take a deep breath and look at the long term. Yes, all of us have had a situation, I mean, even you, Alex, all of us have had a situation where the narcissistic, evil person is winning in the beginning. And if we don't make the right decisions, if we don't approach this the right way, that victory can last almost a lifetime. But if we calm down, we focus on getting our stuff, dealing with the legal stuff as best we can, they start to lose. They can't maintain it. As soon as we stop having an emotional reaction to all this stuff, and I know that goes into a whole nother, my whole channel is devoted on dealing with that aspect of it. But once you get to a point to where you're not responding or reacting in that emotional way, and you can be strategic in what you're doing, it starts to undermine what your narcissistic ex is doing. It starts to rebuild your relationship with your kids if you get to see them, and your life starts improving, which drives them insane.
It does. That's what I was about to ask you. Do you ever feel like when it comes to these high conflict exes that it's almost like you're like a character in this movie or this play, and that as long as you continue to be fill that sort of parameter, which is like you're an abusive, horrible person and you deserve nothing, they're okay. But when you don't do that and you sort of grow and mature and move beyond that relationship, it's like you're not filling what they expected you to fill, and it's like they go insane. So you see that too, then.
Yeah, and the interesting part about that, typically what happens is when you're not playing that role, when you're not doing what they expect, they still act like you are, right? So like if your ex is like, okay, so in my situation, on our first hearing, the supplemental stipulation or declaration that I didn't even know was a possibility pops up, and it said basically that I'm a horrible person, I'm violent, I'm suicidal, I'm murderous. It's kind of like what Zach was saying. And I mean, what I told my attorney at that point is, and for my job, for that to be true, I would lose my job. I mean, my career would be over. And I said, that's BS. That's a lie. It's not true. And the caveat is that if you fall in that bait and you start freaking out, and in that 15 seconds, like Alex was talking about earlier, the judge looks over at you and sees somebody who seems emotionally unhinged, which is really weird because this whole situation is an emotionally unhinging thing. They can make that instant judgment to say, you know what, I'm looking at this person, I can see it in their eyes, they're crazy, they're unstable, so I'm going to err on the side of caution. You have to, not fall into the trap. It's a trap. It's a bait and switch trap to try to get you to respond in a way so that they can point and say, oh, see, I told you, and then you lose everything.
That's one of the things.
Yeah, I absolutely. But just to get back to your question, I absolutely agree that it's like a play. The play has been written. The script is out there. They're playing the part. They expect you to play your part because they know you. They know how you're going to respond most of the time, and they will just play. And when you respond, and even if in their mind they're like, you're a scumbag, right? And that's what they think you say, and you say something like, hey, let's just calm down. They're going to respond like what they expect you to say. Like you still said the lines in the script that they had written for you.
Okay. I was going to just tell you when you mentioned the 15 seconds and pointing the finger, it's like they don't even need to show you do it all the time. They just need like one example. And so it's exactly the way you characterized it. See, look, that person did it that one time. So everything I'm saying is true. We got a question from Liz I actually wanted to go over with you a little bit. First, I'll answer it. Liz is saying, can my ex insist on being the supervisor? My answer to that, and I'm going to go ahead and see what Duane has to say too, but my answer is that is dangerous for two reasons. One of them is my first reaction or instinct is that they're going to supervise and find something that they don't like you did, or just invent or just lie. And they'll return to court and say, yeah, when I was doing these supervised visits, they did this, this, and this, and therefore they shouldn't have any time. And the other problem the other problem is actually physically dangerous. We had a case here in Nevada where a supervisor killed, the mom, her mom, which was the grandmother, shot and killed the father. I'm going to actually go ahead and let Duane give some insight on this, and while I do, I'm going to pull up the article while he's giving his insight. But let me know what you think about having your ex supervise your visits.
Yeah, and I'm just going to, somebody's saying my audio is messed up. So
that's only one
check
person,
the comments
though.
on that, and I'm going to,
okay.
then I'll hit this. My thought on that is you absolutely should not have your ex or any family member be the supervisor. Now, the reason that it might be appealing is because do you really want to spend the money to pay someone to do that, right? And I would tell you, pay the money to have someone else do it because you want a neutral party that's going to submit a report, give recommendations, and you do not want that to be your ex. The problem is you can, most of the time, in my opinion, the courts seem to think that everyone's normal, emotions are just high, and these are basically good people just doing stupid stuff. And I would say in a good percentage of normal divorces, that's probably the case. But when you're in a high conflict, emotionally toxic situation, that absolutely is not the case. It's not. So what I would say, what Liz was saying on that, can the ex insist on being the supervisor? Well, any of the other parties on this can insist on anything, but unless you agree to it, it doesn't mean that a lawyer or a judge is going to rule on that. I would say on that situation, I would say no. We will have a neutral supervisor do it. And unfortunately, Liz, if you're the one that they're insisting that you be supervised, maybe I'm missing that, you know, you will probably be responsible for paying the $50 or $100 to be able to do it. If you, and if at all possible, scrounge the money and do that, because you want somebody that's neutral. You want somebody that can observe the situation and give an unbiased opinion. Now, you need to make damn sure that in that situation that you are doing everything you're supposed to do. And if the supervisor is giving you information, or the person doing the supervised
visit is giving you information that says you're doing things wrong, then I would recommend you ask the question, what should I be doing right? Or what course can I take to be better? And if they say, go take parenting course 101 over here at the community center, go do it.
I just put up the article while you were explaining that to them. I agree 100%. It's worth the money to just have a neutral person do the supervised visits for everything that you explained. And the article that I put up, Duane, is this happened very recently, actually. A few months ago, the father was shot 10 times by his ex's mother, who's a retired detective. She's facing murder charges. I don't know if she already pled out, but this is just one of the more extreme things that can happen. Even when you don't have a situation where you're physically harmed, you often will still have a situation where you're framed, or they cook up something that you haven't never done, they lie, or they just embellish something that wasn't really that bad to begin with. And now you've got, if it's not your ex, and it's even just your ex's friend or your ex's family, you still have a witness that can, testify against you, even though it's not true. It's better to just play it safe and use somebody who's totally disconnected from the case. I went ahead and tweaked the sound settings a little bit, Duane, so I'm going to keep an eye and see if that makes anything better. Everyone is saying that it's a lot better, so whatever I did worked.
All right.
What I did was I adjusted the NDI settings. Hey, just so you guys know, the amount of tech that goes into what we're doing is I don't even know how to describe it. It's more than just complicated. It's like we're doing 3 or 4 different things at the same time with all this software to get it to work. So I wanted to talk about that one issue you brought up when we were discussing this live stream on the phone. It had to do with the debtors' prisons idea. And I have a lot to say on it, but before I do, why don't you go ahead and
before you
let
jump into that, I just want to say, because Zach had commented back, and he says, I played right into her false narrative and I messed up. You're right. See, guys, that's the thing on this. And the hard part about it is you're basically talking about somebody, coming and poking you in the chest, except that they're poking a wound. They're poking your heart. They're hitting all the things that are so damn important to even, who you define yourself as a character, as you define yourself as your personality and your person, and they destroy it all. And it is so hard to maintain your cool and not fall into the trap. But 90% of the time, from when I talk to people on my channel on live streams, and even when I do coaching stuff, these type of situations, they were poked. Nobody sees the poking, but when you react, it blows up. And it doesn't matter. And just to be clear, this is not a guy thing. This is not a, you're a man, so you're going to lose. I have people on my channel, women on my channel, that have taken the bait, that have whispered, really things like, I want to really hurt you. And the guy goes, oh my God, picks up the phone, calls 911. And the next thing you know, he has full custody. The mom now has supervised visitation, and you're living this nightmare. This system, if you make mistakes, will eat you alive.
Absolutely. I used to describe it. You said it was like a trap. I said it was like, I've said, in the past, that it's like they don't have the evidence that they need to, show that you're all these horrible things, because you're not. You're not a horrible person, so they don't have any evidence. So what do? They need to create it. They need to get you to do certain things so that they can say, hey, I couldn't approve what he was doing back then, but look what he just did just now after I pushed all.
But think about it, right? To go back to my example I was using on my thing. When the ex made that comment and my attorney came running out, as soon as we had a break, he came running out and he had a highlighter. She's like, they said you're suicidal, and she's worried you're going to murder the kids, but you can have them every other weekend, right? So she wasn't even smart to ask for supervised visitation.
Right.
But I guarantee you, if I would have blown up, if I would have yelled and screamed, if there would have been a scene, even if I would have done it outside the courtroom, if somebody would have went in and said, man, that guy just flipped out, then I would venture to guess that when we walked back in there, the judge would have said, you know what, we'll do a custody evaluation. Full, right now, full temporary custody goes to mom. Dad can have supervised visitation. He could have even said, you know what, you're not asking for it, but I think supervised visitation is the right way to go. And that would have been my situation. You have to be on, you have to realize that this is like the most important job interview. This is the most important game you're playing. I mean, this is like you're going for the big time. When you step up to do your thing, to play your round, you better have your head on straight. And if that just means taking a lot of deep breaths and breathing slow in yourself and just not looking like you're getting really pissed off, then that's what you do. Right. It doesn't mean you're going to hit a home run or whatever at that time, but you have to be really cautious of how you respond. And I just want to say I'm missing his name. Zach.
Yeah.
Zach, it doesn't help whenever we make mistakes, right? And I made my own mistakes that you have to do, you have to start to try to undo. You can work to undo this. Obviously, it's going to it's making going to make your situation a lot more complicated, and make it even harder for you to dig out of that hole. But it's absolutely possible. You have to focus on when you have the kids, and if you don't have the kids and you completely lost and you're completely out of it, then you focus on dealing with that emotional pain, going through the process of healing, basically the stages of grief. You're going to have to go through all of that, and you can still get your life back on the other side of this.
Well, there were a couple of other comments here. Let's take a look. Shay says she likes the videos that I do with attorney Alex Gabato. I think I've done 2. Yeah, I've done 2 videos with him. People like him. He's an attorney, and he doesn't sound like an attorney. He sounds just like a normal... He just has this way of being a lawyer, but sounding like an ordinary person. I don't know how he does it. He's just himself. That's really who he is, and people really like Alex Gabato for that reason. I can't explain it in any other way except for he is himself, and people like him. So he's very intelligent about the law, at least in what he does. I know he does family law and appellate law, which is actually pretty rare. And my understanding is that hardly any family attorneys bother with appeals. And I think
that's awesome.
The first video that I interviewed him on I didn't even have video of him. It was just audio, and it was on the Las Vegas Review Journal's, they called it a judicial survey that they're doing, and he wasn't too fond of it. And the second video, what was that one on? He gave some comments on the state of Nevada versus Michael McDonald case. Let's see, what else did we have here? There was another question that I think you had, and I could have sworn unless I overlooked it. Maybe you already got it. It was from Zach. But okay, so what did you want to sort of go into the whole thing about debtors' prisons before I got all technical with it? Because I know that this is a hot topic.
Well, yeah. And I'll say, see, this is the whole family court machine is something that's I've always been cautious about, because it will eat your lunch. And that's why oftentimes I'll tell people, people are saying I have an echo now.
Yeah, I'm working on that while you continue. I don't know why.
Okay.
But,
all right. So anyways, the problem is once you start on this, you have to do whatever the hell the court is telling you to do, right? So if the court's telling you to pay $1,000 a month and you only have $500, you pay what you can, and you get your behind into court as quickly as possible so that you can address it. I think what happens is people they look at it and they go, well, I can't pay, so I'm not going to pay. And you're not being thrown in jail for necessarily the arrears, right? I mean, it's like, effectively it is a debtor's prison because that's how it ultimately happens.
mm-hmm.
It's kind of like if you get behind on your visa bill, they're not going to send you to jail. The problem is that you get behind on your payments, so to speak, and then you get or basically they call you in and either you show up or you don't show up. And if you don't show up, then they're going to put a bench warrant out for your arrest for failure to appear. our failure to follow the orders or whatever. So I mean, it's like you're playing the game with the controller upside down. You're trying to say, okay, this is the way it is. And it's like, no, the way the game is that you're standing there, you're not moving, and they're just basically, shooting you, so to speak. You have to, it's how you address it, right? I mean, effectively, yes, you can look at it and say, yes, it absolutely is a debtor's prison. The problem is that there's more to it than that. And again, it falls into how you approach it and how you deal with it. Like, for instance, I mean, if I lost my job and I ran out of, of ability to pay, if I don't do anything, the state of California and my county is going to come after me like the hounds of hell. And I'm sure Alex is going to get into it. There's a process that and to be perfectly honest, if that happened, the first thing I'm going to do is call Alex and say, dude, what the hell do I do? Right. And then you go from there and start to, you fight it through the process. And I think that if people would do that, and I know he's going to get into it, but I think if people would approach it appropriately, even if you did ultimately end up in jail for a little while, an attorney would be able to say, this is wrong on this procedural thing, and it could be undone. Right? I mean, what's your take on it?
So that's the gist of what you should do. And I can really summarize the non-legal approach in a couple of sentences that you put together, which were that this idea that since I can't pay part of it, I'm just not going to pay any of it. That's kind of just a layperson's not understanding, but the wrong approach to take. When it comes to the law itself, you can't be, oh, by the way, I fixed the echo. So the sound was coming out of my monitor instead of the speaker, and I couldn't get it to switch to mic. So now that to headphones. So now that I've done that, the echo's gone.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, guys, just so you know, YouTube took away the Google Hangouts option, and so all of us YouTubers are scrambling to find new ways to do these interviews, and so there's going to be these technical difficulties that we kind of iron out as we go through. But anyway, procedurally speaking, there's no such thing as debtors' prisons. I don't even know if that's procedurally speaking. More so legally speaking, there's no debtors' prisons in this country. What's happening to people, just like Duane said, when they can't pay like a credit card payment, they end up just going through the ordinary process of debt collection. When you can't pay a child support payment, what's happening is they're using contempt of court principles against you. It's different. They're not saying that you need to go to jail because you aren't paying your child support in the sense that you're poor. What they're saying is that you could pay and you're refusing to pay. So the defense is obviously, can't pay. If I could, I would. And so go ahead.
And the thing I want to just jump in on that is, and we were just talking about this before, is if I go in and I say I can't pay, and I don't come in with proof, and I don't come in with saying, look, I got fired or I got hurt, I'm applying for jobs, I mean, this is what I'm doing. And a judge still might be, hey, butthead, I'm still gonna play this role in there. But you have to do it appropriately. If I come in and I just say, I can't pay, I don't make that kind of money anymore, or I have my own bills, or I got remarried, or whatever, it doesn't matter. I better come in with something that for letter of the law says, look, I do not have an ability to pay. I'm trying to pay what I can, but here's, this is how my information backs up with the statute, right?
And what you're doing is you're not using any legal terms, but what you described is you're satisfying the burden of proof. So a lot of people don't know that the burden of proof is on the ex to show that you're not paying child support. The burden of proof flips over to you to show the reason as to why. And so you can't just go into court and say, hey, I'm not paying because I'm too poor. I don't have a job. I don't have this or this or this. You have to do exactly what Duane said and prove it. Show that you've gone to interviews if you've lost your job. Show that you have filed job applications if you've lost your job. If your pay has gone down and your opponent is saying that you could get a better job, well, that's a little bit more complicated of an argument because maybe you really can't. But if you could potentially, if they're right and your wages were slashed by 2/3 or something, you could show that you've been trying to get a new job while you work at this job. And while you're working at this job, you're paying the amount proportionate to what you're getting now. You could also bring an employer in. Say somebody might say, hey, I got fired. And your ex might say no, or sorry, that I laid off. And your ex might say, no, that's not true. You quit or you got fired for a cause. What's the proof? You could bring in the employer, whether they like it or not. It's, you can command them to appear and explain to the court, no, we had to lay him off. Go ahead.
I was watching I wish I should have sent you the link before we started this, a video clip of a gentleman who's just getting hammered in court. He's, it's a video of the court hearing, and the judge is basically saying, hey, Mr. Smith, you were ordered to pay $1,000. You lost your job. That's not, that's your fault. That's not her fault. I'm going to hold this to you. You're in arrears. And in the course of the hearing, he finally, and it's sad because, he had no attorney because he couldn't afford an attorney. His ex is in the courtroom, he's in the courtroom. And what ultimately comes out is the original orders were messed up. The guy was trying to get into court to deal with it. Kept getting pushed off. His ex, being the glorious, evil, Satanistic human being that she is, or non-human, pushed the DA to say, hey, he's finally reached the threshold for felony arrears, prosecute him. They did. They arrested him, felony conviction for child support. His job, he's now a felon. They fire him. And so in the course of this whole thing, the judge is like, wait a minute, Mr. Smith, you were paying. I mean, even whenever he was, when it was too much, he was still trying to pay. And he's like, wait a minute, you were paying? Yes, Your Honor. And it's like, to the ex, it's like, you push this? Well, they can commute the felony. It's not that big of a deal. And, and the guy just starts bawling because his whole life has been destroyed. He had a decent job. Yeah. He's lost his job. His career's over. He's trying to find, a convicted felon employment, which obviously is not going to be what he was getting before. And the judge finally, was like, I mean, she can't make it go away, right? I mean, because technically, procedurally, he was in, at that time, felony arrears. Mm-hmm. His attorney or whoever, tried to defend him did a horrible job on it. Yeah. He got a felony conviction. So that's on his record. And, the whole disaster has happened. So, I mean, it's a tough topic. I mean, it's a topic that really triggers a lot of people.
And it's mainly because of what you said. Even if it's not supposed to work this way, that's how a lot of the judges do end up applying it, which is wrong. Nobody is challenging them. Nobody is taking them up on writ review or on appeal. And so they don't even know it's wrong. Right. I went to a child support guidelines committee hearing. Because in Nevada, we formed a committee that's going to be periodically updating child support. We used to just have the legislature do it whenever they felt like it. Now the committee is supposed to meet, I think every 2 years, maybe it's every 4, and adjust all the formulas. And there was this one guy on the committee that just didn't get it. And he was a legislator. So there's judges on the committee, there's attorneys, and they all sort of understand the dynamics between child support that's owed and also the problem of imputation of income, which is a huge deal with a lot of people because they aren't making enough, and so their income gets imputed. And the legislator didn't get it. He was like, "Well, people should pay for their kids," and everyone's like, "No one is saying."
So many, you know what? And people fall into that trap, right? They think that, oh, well, you just don't want to pay. Right. I mean, I fell into that. I mean, before I went, 20 years ago when I was dumb and married and in my ignorant stage, I didn't understand it. It's like, how does this, because you don't think that people are going to just be vindictive assholes. I mean, for the lack of a better word, until you're in the middle of it, right? And then when you're in the middle of it and you're like, hey, wait a minute, you just took 100% of my pay. I mean, at one point in my situation, when it was temporary orders with the bills and everything that were going on, I literally is at the point where I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to start sleeping in my office because I can't afford to put gas in my car to get back and forth to work. So, I mean, and then it's like, well, what do you do? I mean, I still have to pay because in my job, if I didn't pay, I would lose my job. They would basically, I'm not going to go into detail, but it's a condition of employment to not have those kind of problems. CW comment real quick. It says, I heard of a guy in Texas. He was smart and sacrificed and saved a few grand, maybe 20 total. The fact that he had money was held against him and it increased his child support. Is that really a thing? In my opinion, yes, it is, because I've seen it in California where, if I started to work a lot of overtime and then the ex is like, hey, you make, I'll just use a round number because it's easy. Your normal pay is $100,000 a year and you made an extra 20. Well, the state of California is going to sit there and go click, click, clackety, clack, put it into their guideline calculator support. Yeah. And say, okay, you're working and making an extra 20 grand. That's why I tell people, if you're in that situation, do not make overtime. Don't do it to yourself because Then you get caught up in a situation where, let's say you had to work that overtime, and you didn't have any choice, but then the next year they cut it off and there is no overtime because everything's caught up. You're still going to be stuck until you can go back to court and try to argue the point. So you're just better off not doing it. That's like in my situation, I do a lot to make sure that I don't add any extra overtime or bonuses or whatever. I want to make damn sure that if I ever get called back into court and they key in the numbers, that it comes out either the same amount that I'm paying now or less. Because I don't want to be in a situation where I had a really good year and I made an extra 25 or 30,000 and now I'm paying half of that to the ex, and then I don't have that and I'm taking a hit. So I don't know what you think, what your opinion on that is, but I think it is a thing. You have to be really careful.
You're right about overtime. If it was, I didn't know that that's what he meant. If it's overtime, yeah, that counts. The reason why is because it says so in the statutes. There's no like general overarching principles of child support. All of it is statutory. Statutes control everything with child support, and in the statutes, overtime does count. But if he was talking about just saving up like 20 grand, just because he was just keeping it, not spending as much money and just putting it in the bank,
well, that's
different.
And that looks like that's what they're saying. But what I would say is, okay, so it also depends on the area. In California, I'm not sure about Nevada, it's guideline support, right? Mm-hmm. It's guideline. So you can go to, search on Google and say California child support calculator, and you spit in the numbers, it spits it out. Right. If you're in an area where it's not guideline and they can make arbitrary decisions, and they could look, even in California, they could turn around and say, okay, well, let's do it based off your taxes, your tax returns, and what your deductions are and stuff, because maybe they can eke more money out of it. Again, so it actually, and I think this is a good example of what Alex and I were talking about, is there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes on this. Just with what you're saying, CW, realistically, the answer should be no. However, it depends on what the rules are, and it depends on how the ex asked the court for the adjustment, right? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you agree, Alex?
Well, yeah, because you could be saving money, and then your ex could lie and say, no, he's running a business on the side, so that should count as income. So, if it really is just savings, no, that's not child support. It never will be. And in fact, you can't even be forced to pay out of your savings if you lose your job. If you lose your job, you're entitled to a modification despite the fact that you have $1 million in savings. But
I think what CS is talking about is that they were able to use it and say, oh, wait a minute, he was able to save $20,000 extra for, to save it up. And now that's, obviously he's not paying enough because he was able to save that amount of money. And I've heard about this in Canada. I don't know where I think this was in Texas. Yeah, Texas. That they'll do that. That if it's like, oh, you're making more money, so we'll take more money. Or I've even read an article where an individual, the divorced guy had saved 100 grand. Ex-wife had gone down the pit of hell and was 100 grand in debt, and they took the money from him to pay the debt. I don't know about the Canadian laws, but that's what happened. Let's see. I'm trying to see what else CW is saying. Personally, I hate to say this, and maybe I've heard of other people doing this. I wouldn't put money in a bank account. I would, if you have a gun safe or something, if you're in Texas, I would take it out as cash, and I would keep it separate until you're done with family court. Just because, just that way you have your nest egg, you have your backup plan if something happens, and it's liquid, it's cash. So
yeah,
I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, the way I feel about child support is actually, I'm not sure if it's a novel concept, but I always feel that you should treat parents who have split up the same way that you would treat them when they were together. And if parents are together and somebody has, they lose their job or something goes wrong, they work it out. They don't point a finger at each other and say, hey, you need to go to jail now since you're not contributing to the family. But all of a sudden, when they separate, they become a wage slave. It's like all of a sudden now you're required to do all these things. Well, that's not necessarily true. You're required to make the effort, and you're not allowed to just deliberately not do it just to spite them. But if you're making the effort and you're providing for your child, and then just things happen in life, as they do to anyone, you shouldn't be punished for that. That's just stuff that could happen to any family. And when people are together, they understand that stuff when it happens, and they figure out a way to make the family continue on. But when they're separate, there's just this different. It's like they objectify the non-custodial parent. It's like they're not a person anymore. Now they have to be this machine, and if not, they will be punished. It's not the right. That's my perspective. As far as
Oh,
what
I
you
agree
said.
with you. I think, I mean, because the sad part is, I mean, like even in my situation, because of the amount that I have to pay, it's based off of my current job, my current career, and I can't switch. I mean, I wouldn't even have the ability to say, hey, I'm going to take a break and go back to school and work on getting a master or a bachelor's because I have too big of a bogey I have to pay. So, I mean, and I mean, it's one of those things. I agree with Alex. I agree with you, Alex, that it should be to where if I said I could come in and say, hey, you know what? I've done this career. It's stressing me out. I don't like doing it anymore. I need to do something different. And then be okay. Okay. All right. No problem. All right. What are you going to be doing? Oh, you're not going to be making anything. Okay. So the other, you know what I mean? That it's like that. And like you said, I mean, to where if you're with somebody, you can make that decision. You can sit down and say, hey, look, this is, I mean, and the sad part is I know people have had this conversation when they're married.
Yep.
They're like, you know what? This job is killing me. I can't do it anymore. I have to find something else. And we're going to take a pay cut. And you sit down and you say, okay, you figure things out and you do it. And then in the family court machine, a lot of times you don't get that opportunity.
No.
And I don't know, maybe talking about child support's not a great topic because I know I used to get really angry talking about it. Yeah. So I know and I see that CW was talking, says it's super triggering, talking about this whole process being super triggering. I mean, it is, it's messed up. And this system can and will destroy lives. I mean, I have a friend of mine, or an acquaintance of mine who's the friend of another friend of mine, one of my best friends. The guy has destroyed his life because of family court. And he made those decisions where it started out with, boom, you're paying X amount. What? And he's like, well, screw that. I'm going to work a bunch of overtime. So he works a bunch of overtime, flaunts it to the ex so that she realizes that, and I've made my own mistakes with that to where it's like, oh, really? You're doing that? Well, I'm going to do this to show that it's not bothering me. Yeah. So she brought him back to court and it's like, oh, now you're making more money. So they raised it. And he's like, well, screw you. I'll show you. We're doing cutback. So he volunteered for a layoff and they laid him off. And then they go back to court and the judge says, hey, dumbass, you were making $100,000. Now you're making $0. I'm not changing. I'll give you a month to get another job that pays that, which he couldn't.
Of course.
And then he falls into felony arrears, arrest warrants, can't get a background check, loses a security clearance. He was in the military or working for military contractors at the time. So now he's lost that. Now, then he can't have services. Then he can't get a driver's license and he can't, I mean, it's this nightmare that starts where now he would have been out of that probably 20 years ago. But because he tripped and he went down that road, it's a boat anchor that's going to follow him the rest of his life.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and I get that it's triggering. It's one of the things that's tough on my end too, because it's actually one of the things that people can appeal. The custody modifications are really hard to change once an order is entered, but the child support stuff is different, especially when they impute. And so I really wanted to touch on it to let people know that's one of the areas where you do have some hope. I don't know.
Well, but it's procedural, right? I mean, so here's the thing. Yeah. So, and Alex and I had talked about this offline a couple years ago because I was trying to decide some things I may or may not do on my side. But here's the thing: if I went back and something happened and the court said no, sorry, then there's something I have to do that I would have to talk to my buddy Alex about to point me in the right direction to fight that. Right. I mean, because the system isn't set up to say, OK, we're going to destroy your life now because you're trying. It happens. But there's things that it's almost like if you're sitting in I'm trying to think of an example. Like let's say you're in a group of things and you're having a problem and all you have to do is raise your hand and say, I'm having a problem. But if you don't, they can go, damn, that guy is drowning. I mean, he ain't making a noise. He ain't doing anything for help, and just watch you go under. You have to respond in the way that you're supposed to respond.
Right.
I mean, if I got into that situation and they started hammering me and the next thing they're sending me to jail and I don't ask the question in the right way or I don't file the right appeal, they will destroy my life and they'll go home and have a beer at the end of the day and not even care. And I'm the one who's circling the toilet bowl. Right. I mean, it's just you have to do it the right way, and knowing how the right way is really tough. I mean, everything's out there, all of us can go look at the information and pull open the books and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But you either have to find someone that will do it for you, or you have to do it yourself.
I actually talk about all of that in a video called Who Cares? Because it's like a lot of these people go into court and they are so stressed out and they think that the system's going to care. Somebody will care. But really, nobody does. Not the judge, not the ex, especially not the ex. And the whole point to the video is what you described. You have to care enough yourself to figure out how to find out what button to push. Somebody else isn't going to look at you and see you suffering and say, hey, we need to do something. We need to take action to protect that person. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. I mean, some people win the lotto and the media jumps. Like a lot of people say, I'm going to get the media. It's like, okay, you can try, but it's like winning the lotto sometimes. It's so rare. There's another 100,000 people going through what you're going through, and you're going to be the one lucky person that they pick out to back and put all over plaster all over the news, and hopefully your judge will freak out and stop. No, none of that's going to happen. Nobody's going to swoop in. You're going to have to figure out how the rules work, how the procedure works on your own, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And that's what catches people off guard. I think a lot of people don't think that's the case. They think somebody else is going to care.
Yeah. Right, because you think that it's fair. Mm-hmm. And it's fair in the fact it's fair in the rules that they're in theory distributed, fairly.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not emotional.
Yeah.
You can get up there and say whatever the hell you want, and if you're not saying it in a way or presenting it in a way that matters, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's like, how many times have any of us done something? I'm trying to think, like taken a class or something, or had something to do at work or whatever, and you put out your best foot forward, and they come back and they say, you missed the complete mark, you get 0 on this. And you're like, what the hell? I spent 12 hours on this. I made my point. Yeah, but you didn't use the right form, you didn't use the right font, you didn't do the spacing correctly, and F you, it doesn't count. It's as if you didn't do it, right? I mean, and that's really that's the reality of it. And I think that's what people need to understand, is that part of it.
Yes. Because
you're not going to come in and say, I just want to see my kids. I just want to be a part of my kid's life. Okay, yeah, everyone says that. And everyone says that their ex is a piece of crap, right? I mean, it's you can't approach it that way. I mean, honestly, and I'll just jump into this because this is how it kind of falls into dealing with smear campaigns, which if anyone isn't familiar with that, that's whenever you have an adversary, typically your ex, who's just trying to destroy your reputation. And if you approach that by going to everyone and going, no, it's not true, I'm not this way, people are like going to go back and go, holy crap, this person's freaking psycho.
Yeah.
Which then proves the point, right? It's like you can't address it on pure emotion because most people aren't going to devote the time to even deal with it. And the courts do not have the time to sit there and go through and look at 9 billion hours of information to make a judgment on your case. It's just not going to happen.
They're way too busy. You got to make it as clean and as cut as possible, as simple as possible. The more concise, the easier the case is, the more likely you're going to get justice. The crazier, more complicated it is, the more likely the judge isn't going to care. They're going to overlook something and they're going to make a mistake and something bad's going to happen in your case. And with the emotion stuff that you brought up, one of the things that I noticed in my case was that I was never going to out emotion my ex. There was just no way. Like, she just dominated that field. That was all hers. And she said a lot of the things that you said, I just want to see my son and this and that. Meanwhile, he's suffering physical abuse. His teeth are rotting out of his skull. Grades are D's and F's. But she would she would cry and show her, all this emotion. And it's like, if you don't, luckily the court went with the facts. Imagine if the court did go based on emotion. I don't know how I'm going to outdo that. So,
I would say, stereotypically people respond in certain ways. And I think a lot of time, women will respond to what you were just talking about. Now, I mean, just on again, it's ineffective, right? If you get caught up in this mode and you're sitting there going, well, okay, I'm going to go and cry in the court and they're going to just like, oh, poor you. A lot of times that doesn't work, and you can hurt yourself on that. And conversely, sometimes men will just say, you know what, F it. I'm done. Screw this. I'm out. Peace out. And they'll walk away and they get this horrible ruling that follows them
Yes.
for, a decade or more,
Yep.
that if they're not prepared for it will destroy their lives. I mean, I was fortunate that I understood that. So I was fighting from the beginning to get the most time and the least amount of money I could, because I knew that I had a 12-year stint that this was going to devastate my life. And having this happen in my situation at an older age, I mean, I was in my 42, I think, when this whole thing started. And, I'm looking at it. It's like my family court part of this with child support is done when I'm like 55 or 54.
Yeah.
Which means now I have to start recovering. It's like I don't have a lot of time to recover.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. I was looking at another thing where Scott had said my employer suddenly stopped paying my child support to DCS. I called DCS and they got their accounting department and brought it with me to court. And that's interesting. And we got to be on top of this, because I had something similar happen. One day I get paid. I open up my leave and earnings statement. I look into it. I'm like, holy crap, they turned off child support, right? So I called up our accounting department and I'm like, why did you do that? And then they sent me a copy of the order from my person with the child support services department for my county. And I called them up and I'm like, hey, Judy, or whatever her name was, child support's been turned off. You turned it off. I got an order with your name on it saying you turned it off. So I called her and she's like, oh crap. And what had happened is they sent verification paperwork for medical to my employer. I don't know who the hell they sent it to. They wrote back and said, oh, Duane doesn't work for us. And the system automatically said, oh, okay, well, since he doesn't work for you, stop paying him, stop paying the child support. And I had to put that money back in, obviously. But it was just, and the sad part is had I ignored it and let it go and went months to months to months, I would have been responsible for that number.
Yeah.
And I would have had to have paid it. And if I didn't, they, as soon as they think I'm in arrears, the state of California will send me a nice letter saying, we're going to take your driver's license, any license, construction license or anything else you have with the state of California is going to be suspended until you get current.
Yeah. My ex actually had the same thing happen in a way, but she didn't do what you did. She just claimed that was normal, that was okay. Something happened where the amounts withdrawn from her check weren't satisfying the full child support amount. I can't remember what it was, but she ended up coming into court saying, I thought I was complying with child support, despite all the emails and messages saying she wasn't.
That happened to me too, Alex. Actually, I know exactly. Probably what you're talking about. And I'll throw this out here because anyone who's dealing with this, it's important to know. If most places deal with child support on a monthly basis, your bill is $1,000 or $3,000 a month. That's what the expectation is. If you don't get paid every other, twice a month, and you get paid every other week, well, as we all know, anybody who's on that, you have 2 months a year that you get 3 paychecks. The rest of them are lower. Mm-hmm. So you are going to be running an arrearage for a while until it catches up. And what I noticed with me, as soon as it turned into as soon as I got turned in for being a deadbeat dad who wasn't paying his obligations, and the county was aggressively enforcing it, they would anytime they would be in that lull period, they would seize like my tax returns. So what I ended up having to do is I went, okay, I looked at it and said, what's my arrearages? What's the most it's going to be? And I paid it until there's always a positive balance. It gets down to 0 and that's it. But and it's tough for people because you'll have people who are getting the money who will say, well, you're supposed to pay me $3,000 a month and you're only paying me $2,600 a month. Yeah. You're a scumbag. And then you're going, what the F? It's being garnished out of my wage. What are you talking about? That's what the deal is. And if you have somebody who's really pushing it, or if it's being enforced by the county, it's actually like in California, they'll put it through the state disbursement unit.
Yeah.
And if it's at the state level, if you stop paying, nothing happens. It's not until somebody calls the county and says, I want you to enforce it, that it turns into a nightmare. And if I remember correctly, you told me she was a government worker, so that's every other week, and you're going to run in arrears. And if you don't pay the $200 or $400 or $800 or whatever it is to keep that positive balance, you'll be in arrears.
Right.
I periodically check my account just to make sure that number is 0 or I have a negative balance.
Right. We got Brittany who popped in, and then Shay.
Oh, hey.
Shay said that she's the got camera work or something. I'll let the viewers know Brittany is the person behind the camera in our Nevada Judges. Sometimes though she's not, and she's on the broadcasting. And when that's the case, she's using OBS, just like Duane and I are using today. By the way, let us know if you guys like this new layout and this whole thing about how we can show you our screen and show videos and stuff while we talk about these topics. Let us know what you guys think about that, because that's all new. At least it is to me. I don't know about you, Duane.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. Hopefully we can do some more of this. Yeah. I think we ran a lot later than we anticipated.
We did.
To be honest,
we can wrap it up. I suppose that's it. I mean, I don't know unless there's anything else you want to cover. Shay's asking about state and county levels. I don't think so, Shay. It's just state. It shouldn't be county. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. There are state and county. Yeah. Well, so in California there is, right? There's the state disbursement unit where they'll garnish your pay and just handle it at the state and route the money around that way.
Oh.
But in California, every county has a Department of Child Support Services for that county. In California, when they take that and they route it into their local area, that's when the aggressive enforcement starts, right? I think, and part of it, what it is I think in some way, I mean, everyone seems to think that the family court system is just, and it is a bad system, right? But they think that it's initially there just to punish and ruin someone's life. It takes another person to get that to start. The premise behind it is that when somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, that the system will step in and force it. The problem is whenever someone is vindictive, they can also use that system to cause problems. I don't know if I've talked to you about this, Alex, but I've had conversations with my local county level child support Department of Child Support Services rep, who's told me point blank, because one of some of the stuff that my ex was doing, she goes, "Oh, we get it all the time. All the time we'll have a guy like you," and this was a female that was talking to me, says, "You'll start moving on with your life, and we'll see exes who are already remarried. They're going down doing, living their life, and they'll see that their ex-husband typically is starting to move on, and they will call up and say, 'What can I do to screw with him because he's not paying enough or he's not suffering enough?'" And then the problem is the way the law is written and the procedures are written, they don't get to make the judgment call. Now, I will say this, that they will make sure that person, most of the time, does what they're supposed to do. If they don't follow the rules or they don't press the buttons the right way, they'll just close the case. That happened once with my ex. But if they do it the right way, if they say the right words, they say, whatever, the Harry Potter spell, if you say it the right way, then it's going to happen. Or anyways, I'll get off on too many movie references, but that's in California how it works, is that there are local county offices that will take over the enforcement, will generate modification of orders. And I just want to add one other thing on that. And because I had a friend of mine who had a problem with this. A lot of people think that if there's a problem, that you have to go back to court, right? That they're not going to make a change until you go back and see a judge. At least in California, that's not the case. If the state disbursement or the local county disbursement unit makes a judgment that you owe money or whatever, they're going to just start enforcing it. Yeah. They're not going to go to court and say, okay, Mr. Smith, you have an opportunity to argue your case. They're going to say, according to what's on file right now, you are in the wrong. We need an extra $1,000 and we're seizing your retirement accounts or whatever the heck it is to get it.
I have some insight on this, and I've got to jump in because of everything.
Okay.
You're right. We do have county level child support enforcement divisions, and that is exactly where the aggressive enforcement begins. The state is what controls the actual statutes, rules, all that stuff.
Right, yeah. Right,
but the counties enforce. And I know what you're talking about with regards to how they modify and seek to enforce without going to court. They do it by letter. They send you a letter. And I don't know if you've ever read the letters, but they're usually, not always, usually there's something in the letter that tells you that if you want to go to court, you have to jump through the hoops to trigger the hearing.
Yep.
It does not automatically. That's how that happens. And I think they started to do that because when they were having to institute proceedings themselves, 19 times out of 20, nobody would show up. And so the legislature decided, you know what, we're just going to flip this around. no hearing unless the obliger wants one. And if they do, they've got to jump through the hoops to set one. We're not going to set it anymore. And
Yeah.
that's what's going on there. And you're right; they are way more aggressive. They're I don't know. They weren't that tough on
Well,
my ex, but that's because he couldn't find
you know
her.
what? Well, and I will say this on my side, they were nice people. I mean, I would have conversations with them and they were friendly people. And there were times where something would happen and I would call up and say, hey, Jessica, what happened? And they're like, huh? Oh yeah, no, you're screwed. I mean, the system automatically generated it. I mean, it wasn't like some person sitting there going, oh, Duane screwed up. Let me execute, plan 1 alpha on them. It just automatically happens. And it's, I mean, and that system is following the statutes and the procedures and stuff. So one thing I will say before we wrap this up, if you're in this situation, make sure, if you at all possible, stay current. Do not allow that part to happen. It's like, again, the feel good moment, going back to the title of this live stream, and I'll give you an example of doing something that makes you feel good in the moment, as opposed to what helps you, right? I know we were talking about it more in actually making substantial changes, but one of the mistakes I made early on in my situation is, we were getting ready to do the government shutdown. I was trying to work with the ex saying, hey, let's stipulate a change. And she's like, nope. And it made me angry. So when it came down to it, I took 2 weeks off without pay because I'm like, screw you. I'm not going to be in this situation. She obviously got mad and she turned me into child support services for being a deadbeat dad. And like I mentioned, she didn't do it correctly. So they closed the case. And then a few months later, whenever she realized that I had a girlfriend and was moving on, they turned it on and started it. I mean, if you can just keep everything status quo to where you don't have that enforcement arm breathing down your neck, I would encourage you to try to keep it like that, because at the end of the day, it creates a whole nother avenue of problems and stress that you don't need, right? I mean, There's stuff that I've had to deal with because of that. Like I said, having my tax return intercepted. I mean, even for $200, because there was a period of time where when they ran the check in the system to issue me my tax return, it was one of those months where I was a little bit low, and they're like, "Oh, you're $200 in arrears," so they intercepted it and took it, and it's just that type of crap. You just don't even want to deal with it.
Right.
So
before we go, somebody from my channel asked how they could get in touch with you. I'm going to load your website up onto the screen share, and go ahead. They asked specifically about how to email you and stuff. While Duane explains this to you, I just pulled up his website so you guys can take a look. Go ahead, Duane.
Yeah, it's okay. There's 2 main ways to get a hold of me: at my website, dadsurvivingdivorce.com. If you want to email me, it's just Duane, Duane, at dadsurvivingdivorce.com. I also have my YouTube channel, which is Dad Surviving Divorce, or DSD. Just to clarify, I mean, people who've been on my channel know this. I am not just a dad's channel. It's for anybody who's dealing with toxic divorce relationship with kids. So my demographic is like 55% women to 45% men. It's a forum to try to help you, basically figure out how to deal with the emotional side of this, how to make your situation better. I do also coaching, so if you want some one-on-one help, you can do that, and actually you can find that at the website as well, just clicking under coaching. And yeah, and he just pulled up the channel, or he's pulling it up. I don't know what the delay is, but yeah, and I have tons of videos on this. There's even some interviews that Alex and I have done in the past, even some live streams. And my focus is how to help you emotionally deal with the stress of this situation, to start getting to the point where you feel like you can get your life back and start taking back your life, to be perfectly honest.
Right. So thanks for coming on, Duane. It was great having you. Hopefully we can do more of this stuff in the future with OBS.
This is good, man.